Welcome to Wellness is a Way of Life, the podcast for female leaders seeking sustainable energy, clarity, and confidence. I'm Megan Swan, your guide on a journey to mastering wellness as an integrated part of your life. Let's explore personalized wellness strategies that truly resonate with who you are. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to jump into this conversation with Alli. She and I met through a cohort. We're currently in the second half of it in the business mastermind, but I think the first part, at least for me, well, we can discuss this, was more powerful, certainly in connecting with all of these incredible women. Alli's story is a bit unique. After more than a decade of climbing the corporate ladder, she acquired 3 of her favorite titles. I love how she describes this to date: mom, Fortune 500 company retiree, and a life transformation coach. As a new mother, she felt firsthand the internal struggle that comes with trying to stuff in countless parenting, family, health priorities around a traditional full-time job. We just know it's so much cognitive load. It's insane. So overwhelmed and exhausted, she made it work for the first year of her baby's life before deciding that there had to be another way, which kind of leads us to this conversation today. I'm really excited. She's got so much wisdom to share. So welcome, Alli. How are you?
Thank you, Megan. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. It's Monday. It's been a lot of things have changing, but one of them is entrepreneurship. Is if your kids need to stay home sick, it's not that big a deal, I guess.
Right. I know. It's such a nice change.
Less to juggle. So yeah, I'd love for you to walk us through this catalyst moment for you when it was clear that you were no longer interested in being a leader in corporate. And, was that kind of like your childhood dream, or did you just kind of lead up to it? Those kind of questions to set us up.
Yes. So my childhood dream was to be a stay-at-home mom. My mom stayed at home with us when we were young, and I just had such an awesome childhood from that regard. She was always around, and we always did really fun and creative things. And I just liked that lifestyle as I had observed it with my own mom. But that's not really the path that I took. So I went to college. I got a degree in communications. I held several internships while I was still in college. And then when I graduated at the age of 21, I got a job and, was in corporate. And I loved it for some reasons. Like, I ended up having amazing female managers, especially early in my career. And they really helped me kind of just get into the workforce and give me the nurturing that I needed at that time. But I struggled a lot with anxiety in my early 20s, and that was very prevalent for me in the workforce as well. I can remember at my first job going into the bathroom and just being basically in the middle of these panic attacks, going into the handicap stall and just being in there for a while and really feeling my anxiety get triggered a lot in the workplace, especially with like big meetings and presentations, but just stuffing it down because I needed to figure this out. I needed to figure this corporate life out and make money and eventually advance and all of these things that I grew to desire to do. And so I just ended up doing the whole corporate thing for about 13 years. I worked at several different large companies and held a number of different roles. Eventually got into people leadership, which was my favorite thing that I did while I was in corporate. I loved being a people leader, and loved the people that worked on my team. But after I had my son, I just realized that there was something that I loved even more, and that was my family and freedom and flexibility. And I just wasn't getting enough of those things in corporate, even though I worked at a company that was known for being pretty flexible and having good work-life balance and being a good place for working moms. For me, it still was a lot with the commute and just trying to stuff in the mental load of everything related to work and life and parenting and my health and all of the things that I was trying to navigate. So I guess I eventually shifted into my old dream, back my childhood dream, just this past year when I finally got out.
Yeah, well, I'd love for you. I mean, first of all, just to point out that in corporate, work-life balance is usually like a relative thing, right? Like it really depends on, who your manager is, the company culture, like so many aspects, what your specific role is. So I'd love if you could think of a few examples of maybe things that were said or feedback that just rubbed you the wrong way when you were in the early stages of being a new mom and you were, probably back at work pretty quickly after giving birth and just things that made it clear to you that you weren't in alignment.
Yeah. So I think the biggest turning point for me after becoming a mom and going back to work, my son was born in 2022, and my company had taken a pretty conservative approach during the COVID years. And we were 100% work from home for years, including when I had my baby and when I was on maternity leave. And so when I first went back, we were still 100% remote and I could do it. It was still hard. It was still a lot having a full-time job, but it made some of the trade-offs easier for me. So I was breastfeeding my son, and that meant that even though I was pumping a few times a day, it was from my house. Like it was from this room that I'm sitting in right now. My kitchen is steps away. It was super easy for me to store the milk, all of that. And then a couple months after I got back from maternity leave, that's when all companies started having people return to the office. And my company specifically was on a 3-day a week plan. And they were very generous with giving employees time to ramp up to those 3 days. They didn't expect it to be an overnight switch, but they did want us to get there. And they made that clear. And, while I can respect that decision, I would say it was really that for me, that shift of, okay, now I have to commute to this office that's over an hour away in traffic both ways, and it just made it to where the things like pumping and these other things that I was doing on the parenting side were much more challenging. And then of course, for anyone, when you have a commute like that, you just realize how many hours of your life you're wasting sitting in your car and sitting in traffic when you already don't have enough time in the day as it is, and now you're seeing, 2 hours every day where you could be doing things that need tending to at the house. You could be ordering things online that need ordering or working out or whatever else the priorities are. And so all of that kind of went away too.
Yeah. I think it's great, important for men too, but certainly for women that are moms or that are taking care of somebody else at home, just that ability to have control of your time to some degree. And yeah, it's just takes so much time away, the to and from. And then there's so many things that you can sort of multitask. Not that I'm super pro multitasking, because that's not always great either. But you can, if you're at home, it's so much easier to sort of get lunch started, be sort of doing laundry, like all these things can be
Right.
in the background that makes your end of day so much easier.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And then even with like the time change and then getting home and it's after dark and now it's only, an hour or two before the baby goes to bed, that was really hard for me too.
Yeah. So tell me more. I know that we talked at the retreat that you were under like a functional medicine treatment program. Can you tell us a little
Mhm.
bit about that? Like what it entails and how it all started?
Yes. So I started my functional medicine journey in 2021, and I had heard about functional or integrative medicine for a long time, but I had never actually been to a provider myself. until I had this really traumatic miscarriage in 2020. It was our first pregnancy, and it was just, I guess, very physically abnormal. I had a ton of blood loss, and after profusely bleeding for like 18 hours, finally had a surgery to stop that and ended up having to get blood transfusions, so multiple bags of blood. And I mean, after the way that you feel after losing that much blood is insane. Like you feel like you're dying. And that's what I kept saying over and over when I was in the ER is I feel like I'm dying and like what's wrong. And so it was just really scary. And it was the thing that finally pushed me over the line to actually do the functional medicine thing for myself. Because even though it's not typically covered under insurance, which makes it expensive, I was like, I can never go through them again. And I felt like for me, I wasn't really getting answers from my regular doctor and my OB. They didn't even want to do more detailed lab work. My OB did agree to do it because my experience had been pretty unique. But typically, it was the type of blood work that they wouldn't even do until you'd had 3 consecutive miscarriages, which is just awful. Like, why does somebody need to go through that 2 or 3 times before you'll order them additional lab work through Quest?
Always once not enough. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So she luckily did order me those labs through Quest, and it was more detailed labs than I had ever done, but it was still through conventional medicine. And didn't really get many answers. They were like, this looks good. And so I got on the wait list for a functional medicine provider and wasn't able to get into her until May of 2021. And when I had that first appointment, it was just the first time in my life that I felt so seen and like genuinely cared for. I think our initial appointment was 2 hours long, and she asked me everything from when I was a baby in my mother's womb to, coming into the world, and lots of things that I had experienced during early childhood, sicknesses, medications I had been on, traumas, just all kinds of things that most people probably wouldn't even really think as like related or relevant, but in the functional medicine world, they were. And so I did, I guess, what I would say my first protocol in 2021. We did a gut test, a nutrient deficiency test, and some lab work to see if there were any like main overarching food groups that I was having sensitivities to. And I had things going off in all of the above that I needed to address. So my protocol looked like changing my diet, adding in supplements to address some of what came back in my gut report and also in my nutrient deficiency report. And that's the thing that I really liked about the approach that I took with this particular provider. It wasn't like, oh, you should just go on these 20 supplements, but they were actually recommended based on my levels and what was low or high and needed to be optimized. And then I have just continued working with her on and off over the past 3 or 4 years. And I guess it was after I had my son in 2022 that I wanted to do another round of things because having a baby takes a lot out of you and breastfeeding takes a lot out of you. And so I felt like at that point, I was starting to see some issues again. Some were the same that I had experienced previously, some were different. And so we did some additional testing and follow up. And really, it was in that second protocol from her that I just noticed over and over in her treatment plan for me. It, of course, had the supplements and the things that I've already talked about, but it also said several times, like, you need to reduce chronic stress. You really need to address stress. Like, your gut cannot heal even if you're taking all the supplements, if you're not addressing the stress, these nutrients are not going to stay where they need to be, or your gut bacteria isn't going to stay where it needs to be. So that to me was an eye opener that perhaps it was time for me to do even more beyond the functional medicine approach itself.
So do you think, looking back, even were you worried of the time? Was the stress what you were actually dealing with at work, or was the stress of juggling and the guilt, mom guilt?
I think it was the stress of everything combined. Like, I think it would be unfair of me to say that it was just work. I mean, was my job stressful? Yes. Was that first year back after having a baby and going back to the office especially stressful? Absolutely. And there was a lot going on that year too that was different from other years when I had been in corporate, and just different challenges for me to navigate as a leader. But I do think that it was the stress overall of just trying to juggle everything and trying to prioritize my health and take all these supplements and vitamins and eat really clean and, chew my food 30 times and take care of a baby and, work and be in back-to-back meetings and breastfeed and remember to like go to the grocery store and order things that we needed in the house. And it just was like one thing after another constantly. And that was what was really getting to me and just making me feel like I do not want to do this anymore.
Yeah. So did you, or can you pinpoint like an actual catalyst moment that it was clear like this is something you're now going to opt out of, or was it
Yes.
sort of this long strategic planning?
So there was a catalyst moment. So I stopped drinking alcohol in September of 2023. And I had only, it was interesting because when I stopped drinking alcohol, I was drinking the least I ever had in my life. Gone were the days of like extreme binge drinking in college and even heavier drinking in my 20s and early 30s. But I would say I was drinking maybe once or twice a week. And if it was twice, I would say one of those was during the week and then one was on the weekends. So I really wasn't drinking that frequently, but I did have that one night during the week. Usually it was the day that I'd had my most stressful day of meetings, the most intense meetings, or the most number of meetings, that we would sit down on the couch at the end of the day after the baby had gone to bed. We would turn on our shows and like drink wine on the couch. And so that was gone as of September of last year. And then in October, I took a 3-day workshop about finding your purpose. And I was on vacation during the time. I was actually in Florida. And when I did that, I just started to get a lot of clarity that I'd never really had before, and a lot coming through to me, I would say at like an intuitive level about what I was supposed to be doing.
Mm.
And it included coaching, it included helping women that had gone through similar struggles to what I had gone through with the miscarriage and with becoming a mother and now being in corporate and not really wanting to be in corporate anymore, helping them navigate that and in an accelerated timeline than I did myself. Because I think anytime we can work with someone who has been in the shoes that we are in, they can just help us like almost get the Google Maps version of like, what do we need to do now? What's the fastest way to get there? And so that was the vision that started coming through to me in late October. And then when I went back to work that next week, because I was just on like I don't know, a 3 or 5 day vacation, I was called into my boss's office and she told me about an org change that was impacting our team and me specifically in a pretty undesirable way. I don't want to go into the details of what it was, but it just felt like a huge slap in the face to me, where that my role, everything that I had been working on for years and everything we had been talking about from a development perspective, like wasn't really happening with this org change. It was kind of the opposite. And my role really started to feel irrelevant, like even to me. And that was the thing that even though it was super hard and I was really upset and cried about it, I actually just sent out an email newsletter last week about how I cried like at least 5 times in the office in front of other people, which was so not my MO. I was always the girl that had it together and that wasn't, acting like that at the office. But I was really upset and hurt. And I think it was the pain and the discomfort from that particular change that forced me to see the light and see that like I needed to prioritize myself. I needed to prioritize my health, the physical health stuff that I was working on with my functional medicine doctor, the mental health, the chronic stress, like all of it. And basically, it made me see that nobody was going to choose me. Like I had to be the one to choose me.
Love that. So, what's the number one or kind of top few things when you're thinking of the woman that you're trying to reach? Like, what are her biggest fears in just making that decision for herself?
So I think a lot of women that are in these shoes are highly ambitious, like high achievers. And so they really like having something of their own and they don't want to give that up. And I think also for moms that have had babies and they're working, there is also an aspect of having help with childcare that's super nice. And I think sometimes women think, oh, if I leave my corporate job to do my own thing, that means that I'm like being a traditional stay-at-home mom, getting rid of all childcare support, doing the stay-at-home mom thing 100%. But maybe I desire to start a business myself. So then I'm going to attempt to do that while also having, children around all the time, which that doesn't really feel good either. And so I think it's just the question of like, what would I do instead and how would I make it work? Whether it's making it work financially, making it work from like a routine perspective with just the day to day of balancing everything. But those are two of the biggest questions that I hear from women.
I love that you call that out because, even someone like yourself who self-proclaimed dream was to be a stay-at-home mom, to be a good stay-at-home mom does not mean that you need to be with your children 24/7.
No, well, and stay at home motherhood has evolved so much from when I saw it 36 years ago when I was a child. I think back then it was more black and white, and stay at home moms did pretty traditional stay at home mom things. And now there's still some people that do that, that like that. And I mean, amen to them. That is a hard job. But there's also this really big gray area where you don't have to go all in the working world with a 9 to 5 or at home. Like there's this huge middle ground that exists that you just have to get really creative to figure out like what that could look like for you and your family.
So, last question. I would love to, you mentioned that you quit drinking before the finding your purpose kind of aha moments. How are those two things related, and how do you feel now? You're what, a year plus?
A year, yeah. So I think that they're related in such an unexpected way. I never would have thought on the front end of making that choice that the two things were related, but I can tell you that after I removed alcohol and after I removed even that one night during the week where I would numb out to an extent, things just got so much more clear. I think that's the word that I used a lot when I was really early on in my alcohol-free journey was the clarity was just next level. And that was through intuition and through just the desires. I guess I would say like you feel the pain and kind of the struggle more. And then you also feel here's what I really want to do and like what I'm really passionate about and what really brings me joy. You feel those things more too. So I would say it's like the natural highs and lows of our hormones and all of our brain chemicals that when we're drinking alcohol, even once or twice a week, it just starts to alter that a bit. And then was there a second part of your question that I'm forgetting?
No, I think that's, yeah, I relate to that deeply. For me, it was this reflection that to that point, up until that point, so for me, it was like late 30s that I quit, but I was clear like early 30s that I probably should, that I'd always sought, and that it was this, that it's idealized to seek numb instead of to seek clarity.
Mhm.
Like a really oxymoron for me as a yoga professional, where it's like you do yoga to seek clarity, and then I would be drinking wine to seek the lack of clarity. Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think as time goes on, that just amplifies this sense of just trusting your intuition and being like, no, this is what I'm going to do.
Right. And I would never want to change, earlier parts of my journey because I think it all contributed to where I am today. But I can even see what you just said being true. Like if I look back at myself in my early 20s when I was in corporate and I was having all of those physical symptoms, but instead of trying to get clear, it was like, okay, how can I, eliminate this anxiety? And is there a pill that I can carry in my purse that if I have a panic attack, I can take to help me basically escape these feelings? And I did try that route with anxiety and it never worked for me. I absolutely hated like the way the medications made me feel and they just really didn't help at all. And so going the functional medicine route also has helped me with just being able to work through anxiety on my own and have it not really be a detriment to my life. And I think with eliminating alcohol, that's even a next level step there too, where once you get rid of alcohol, your anxiety just becomes so much more manageable. You don't have the extreme anxiety after nights of drinking when your hormones are going all out of whack and you're producing tons of extra cortisol that's unnecessary. So that's been a positive change as well.
Yeah. Amazing. I love our little community. We share all this
I
like-mindedness.
know. It's can be really hard
You're
to
preaching to the
find.
choir.
Yeah, it can be really hard to find when you're the one that's kind of making all of these unconventional choices, but it is nice, yes, when we join communities and we can find other like-minded ladies.
So tell us, what's the best way to get in touch with you if someone's really resonating, being like, Alli is speaking my language. I need her insight immediately.
Yeah, so they can go to my website, allieldridge.com. I spell my name Alli, and then last name is Eldridge. And my website is honestly a little bit basic right now, but I have some information on there for the mom who's working in corporate, who is really looking to find freedom from that lifestyle and discover whatever fulfills her and lights her up in this stage of life. And I do also have a free guide on there that folks can download. And it's really for working moms who are just struggling to like find the time in their schedule to even think about these things. Like, I think that can be frustrating sometimes when you're in corporate and you hear people say, oh, just think about what your dream life could look like and do all of these journal prompts. And it's like, well, when am I going to find the time to do that? So, there's
Mm.
4 ways you can find the time. Some of them include like leveraging your corporate benefits, getting creative about how you're using time off and what types of time off you're taking. And then there are some self-discovery questions in there as well. But I really do think it's a matter of like making the time first so that you can actually get in touch with yourself. And then I'm also on Instagram. So my Instagram name is alli.eldridge. And I post a lot on there about just mindset, corporate life, finding freedom from that, and even some fun things like manifestation.
Beautiful. I will share all those links in the show notes for everybody. And yeah, just to be clear, someone who's just kind of even pondering this with no intention to leave corporate soon is kind of who you're talking to, right? Doesn't need to be someone who's like ready to jump.
I think a lot of times people feel like they don't want to leave corporate. Even people I've encountered that I know I could help them so much. They're like, but I don't want to leave my job. I'm like, okay, you're saying that now. And I think it's because there's so many beliefs that they have to work through. And this idea of like, what would I do instead? Or I would have nothing to do or no ways to be productive. And so, yes, if you are in that camp and you think that you love your corporate job or that you have it so good where you work, I would still love to work with you. I think a lot of women have an idea in their mind, even if they think they would want to do it as a side hustle to their corporate job, but something inside them that they're passionate about that they see as maybe a passion project. Maybe it's a book or a podcast, or maybe it is starting up some sort of a business on the side. But I love helping women figure out how to start businesses. I think that's something that can also be overwhelming and intimidating, but with the background that I have in communications and marketing, that's what so much of it is nowadays anyway, is just online marketing and really getting yourself out there and creating a brand. So I'm also helping women like launch photography businesses and creative design businesses and just a whole bunch of things. And that's always really fun as well.
So fun. Well, thank you so much for your time and your vulnerability and sharing your story with us today. And yeah, well, we'll be seeing each other in the community.
Yes, thank you, Megan.
Thanks for tuning in to Wellness is a Way of Life. Are you ready to make wellness a natural part of your routine? Let's stay connected. Go to meganswanwellness.com. Until next time, live well and thrive.